Now, to go completely to the other side of things, Edward the Confessor is just a completely different side of things. He becomes an actual saint. He has a little bit of a run here, but he overly complicated everything by basically being celibate as far as we can tell, right?
Absolutely. He is the one who really is the root cause of all the events of 1066. He was Ethelred's son by Emma, who was a Norman duchess and then became the English queen. So when Ethelred was driven out of England, he took Edmund and his brother Alfred, or Edward, Edward, these names in this book, took them across to Normandy, and they were basically raised there from boyhood. So Edward was half Norman by blood. He was raised in Normandy. He considered himself Norman. And when he came back, he was invited to come back over by one of Canute's sons, Arthur Canute, who, although he was king of England by right of inheritance down from Canute, really didn't want to be bothered with it. He was more into partying. And his mother was Emma, so Edward was his half-brother, invited Edward to come over and sort of handle the work of being a king. Well, Arthur Canute died not too long after that, dropped over of either a stroke or was maybe poisoned. There's a lot of poisonings throughout this book. Poisoning was a lot more popular weapon than you think back in those days. So Edward being Norman, and as you say, a celibate, nobody knows why that is. He married Earl Godwin's daughter, and whether they were both celibate out of religious reasons, if maybe one of them was infertile, or maybe he did not want to have children with her because she was Godwin's daughter. Godwin was not that popular with Edward. For whatever reason, he had no children by her. And in the 1050s, there was a bit of a revolution or a rebellion, and Earl Godwin and his son, Harold Godwinson, were forced out of England. And in the course of that time, while they were in exile, Edward invited William of Normandy, who by this time made himself Duke of Normandy. Edward invited him over and promised him the kingdom. He said, when I die, because Edward was a lot older, he said, when I die, I'm not going to have any children. I want you to have the kingdom. This was mid-1050s, I believe. And William was saying, okay, that's great. I have my dukedom. Now I'll have a kingdom. Well, William went back home. The Godwins had a resurgence, came back over and reasserted themselves. And for the rest of the reign, which was maybe 15 years, something like that, Earl Godwin subsequently died, and Harold Godwinson, his son, took his place. And when Edward died in January of 1066, Edward forgot or reneged on his promise to Duke William and said to Harold, you're effectively king already here. You are the most powerful man in England. Harold was probably more powerful and more popular than Edward at that point. And Edward said, you take the kingdom. It's yours. So Harold, obeyed his king's orders and accepted the throne. Well, Duke William over in Normandy hears that, sends messengers over and says, oh, wait a minute. This is supposed to be mine. This was promised to me. Are you going to hand it over? And Harold's like, no, I'm not. And that's where it went downhill, because Duke William had fought his way up the ladder. I mean, the Normans were a pack of wolves. He was the biggest wolf in the pack and could not be seen to be shamed like that, to have his rights taken away as he saw it. And he decided that he was going to invade England and take Harold at his word and come take England from him. And a lot of the Normans thought that could not possibly be done. William's father, Robert, had actually tried it to take Edward the Confessor across the Channel in the 1030s, I want to say. And the Normans were, although they were descendants of Vikings, they had long since quit being good sailors. The whole fleet was blown off course, and they sort of gave up on it at that point. But Duke William decided, nope, I'm going over. I'm going to take England from this upstart Harold.